I went to a party one time in high school. I was pretty excited about it because I was going with my girlfriend, and also I got invited to a party, and also I was going to drive a car that I owned with my own ownership, with money that I got from selling contemporary Christian compact discs to people in the mall, at the Christian bookstore, which had an Orange Julius in front of it, so I could get Orange Juliuses on my break. And I had a fashionable haircut in the style of legendary crooner Vanilla Ice. And in general, I was just on top of the world. So I was on top of the world when I went to this party, and then we got in there, and I tried to do things like I'd seen in movies that sophisticated people do at parties. I talked with people. I leaned against things. I thought it was going really well. But then I looked over and I saw that my girlfriend was hanging out with this other guy. And she was really sitting very, very close to him. And I watched them interact, and he must have been saying things that were very funny because she was laughing very easily at pretty much every word that came out of his mouth. And then to my horror, I saw her take her right pointer finger and middle finger and put them to the temple of her ear and smile real big as she moved her hair back over her ear while looking at him. And I thought, well, that ain't good. And I'm happy for them because it seems like they had a really nice time chatting and laughing about things that night. And then to make matters worse, I didn't get home on time, so my parents weren't happy, and I got grounded. And on the whole, this is pretty much the worst party I ever went to. But it was nowhere near as bad as Haman's party in Esther chapter 7. And I tell you, one of the big differences between the two is that I didn't get impaled and stood up in the air 75 feet for everybody to see my dead body after that unfortunate high school party. But Haman did. In Esther 7, the heroine of the story finally comes clean, and she's like, I'm Jewish, and that guy right there, Haman, is trying to kill me and all the Jews. She tells the king. The king is not pleased with this. He stomps out onto the balcony, and Haman, realizing that his fate has already been decided by the king, he stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. And just as the king returned from the palace garden where he was out stewing to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. And then the king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she's with me in the house?" As soon as the words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Who is they? I don't know, like the attendants, the bagman. There's probably a bagman there who just has a bag all the time in case somebody says something that the king really, really didn't like. Then somebody we didn't even know was at the party immediately chimes in. It says, then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king. Ah, it's a eunuch again. Now remember, just a few years after these events, we're in 473 right now. In 465, some eunuchs who attended the king are going to foment rebellion and discontent, and the result is that King Xerxes, he's going to end up getting assassinated. But in the meantime, he's been receiving a whole lot of counsel from these eunuchs. And it's interesting because in the book of Esther, the narrative about eunuchs is, or I should say the tone, the framing of the eunuchs is pretty positive, much more positive than secular sources covering the same subject matter at the same time, where eunuchs are seen as seedy and skulking and plotting and manipulative. Here, yeah, they give the king some nudges, but everybody gives this king nudges. He's very powerful. He's just not very decisive. And this particular eunuch we met earlier in Esther chapter 1, which is all the way back in roughly 483 BC, in the third year of Xerxes' reign. Remember, he has that party, that war council, probably where he's mapping out an invasion of Greece. And this is the party that results in Vashti being deposed, for whom Esther ends up serving as the replacement. So it's 10 years ago here when we catch this name for the first time, but we definitely catch this name, Esther 1, verse 10. On the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, not to be confused with Bigthana. There are 2 names in here that kind of sound like that. That was one of the assassins who plotted to kill him. Harbona, there he is, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass. And the king specifically has his 7 big, main, powerful eunuchs go and get Queen Vashti on his behalf. That's how she knew that it was a very official request. Well, the king's eunuchs also went and retrieved Haman when it was time for him to come and attend this party in the end of chapter 6, when Haman was freaking out when his wife and his friends were like, "You are so dead." So this eunuch and eunuchs in general, they've been lurking in the background. But this Harbona guy, he's been with Xerxes for 10 years. He has seen a lot of stuff. He saw that party. He's seen the king's bad decision-making. He no doubt was one of the contributors to trying to put the king back together emotionally after the disaster in Greece and then the disaster socially in Turkey. Remember, in modern-day Turkey, in the city of Sardis, a whole sordid affair began that resulted in rebellion and internal strife and violence within his own family. It was ugly. And really, the events of 480 and the personal calamities that came after, it looks like from the ancient historians, that was the beginning of the end of the reign of Xerxes, even though he wouldn't ultimately see his reign collapse until 465, when, at the urging of certain eunuchs in the household, maybe Harbona, maybe not, he ends up being assassinated. So I think it is really interesting to note that when you look at the ancient historians, eunuchs look bad. When you look at Esther, eunuchs look somewhere between good and maybe even agents of God's providence. It seems like maybe the original audience was intended to understand these eunuchs in this story as a fusion of the two. Do they manipulate? Do they work over the king? Are they bloodthirsty opportunists? Yeah. Did they also look out for Queen Esther? It looks like, yeah, they also did that. But are they the true grand master manipulators who control all of history, as the secular historians would have you believe? Or is the unseen force that caused the king to have a sleepless night on just the right night and all of these other little providential turns of events to happen? It's that force who's the true force who governs history, not the shadow government behind the government run by eunuchs, not the figurehead of the government, Xerxes. It's this God who's behind all of it and who directs everybody's actions and hearts like a watercourse to accomplish his redemptive purposes. Well, in this case, his redemptive purposes involve justice for a horrible, evil, wicked, murderous man on a scale that history had rarely seen up to this point, and the suggestion of how to do it is provided to the king by one of his eunuchs. Harbona says, "Hey, a gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He made it for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." Here we see again that this king is in that state of paralysis. He's good at feeling emotions and being mad, and he knows he shouldn't be happy about what's going on, but what should he do next? He's waiting for somebody to tell him what to do with his anger. And Harbona, who's been with him for 10 years and has seen that party and has seen the fallout afterwards and has seen the rise of Haman, who has seen Mordecai save the king's life, who has seen Mordecai be passed over for that, who has seen Haman rise to power, who has seen Haman's shenanigans and questionable character and the risk that Haman poses to the realm and to the king. This guy's seen it all, but he's a very shrewd eunuch, and he's waited for his opportunity to play his hand. And now, perhaps inspired by Esther, who also bided her time and waited for the right moment to play her hand, he plays his and just says, well, I mean, oh, great king, if you're looking for something to do, or what a nice response would be, there's a gallows right there. But it's also interesting that Harbona doesn't really say you should hang him. He just says, if anybody's curious here, there's a gallows. It's right by Haman's house. He actually made him. It's for Mordecai, who helped save the king. So, ... And that's enough for the king to know what to do. I imagine the countenance of the king shifts from anger and flusteredness to focus and resolve, as now he knows what to do. And in the most kingly and determined of voices, he says, hang him on it. Verse 10, so they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. And you know, as a reader, you'd almost feel bad for the guy if he weren't actively in the process of planning the genocide of the entire Jewish race. This has been good for me. I'm glad we had this conversation. This frames it up. This gives me perspective. And I feel way more at peace with how that party went for me in high school. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.
Thank you to all of you who have taken the time to leave a rating and review on your podcast apps. We're grateful because it's encouraging and it helps new people find their way here.